All right, welcome back, guys. We're going to continue talking about the airport environment. We're going to get into signs, markings, and lightings that you're going to find around the airport. This will get you going along your way quicker if you commit these rules to memory, or these signs and to memory. It's not going to be everything. You can look into it more, but right now I just want to get you going. We're going to talk about the signs. So talking about signs, the first thing you want to know is where you are. So a black sign is where you are. So if you're on a taxiway, or actually if you're on a runway and you just look in front of you, scratch that runway for a little bit because I'm going to add something else to that stuff. But if you just look up, if you're on a taxiway, look up, the sign that's facing you, that's a black sign, is going to be where you are. So if we're taxiing around and I say, hey, stop the aircraft, tell me where you are, or while you're rolling, hey, where are you? You look up, you see, well, that sign's facing me. It says A, I'm on taxiway Alpha. All right. Yellow, and we're going to use purple for yellow because yellow won't show on the board for the video. Yellow is going to be a directional sign. So if you want to know where you're going, just look up, or where you want to go, look up and look for a yellow sign, and it will tell you where you're going. A giveaway for a directional sign is it also has arrows in it. And the arrow will be either facing left or right, or a little bit upwards, or a little bit more downwards, or maybe just in one direction. And that will be in a yellow sign. Now, another thing you should know about the yellow sign is that the yellow sign will always come prior to the turn, or prior to wherever you want to go. So let's say you wanted to go to taxiway Gulf. As you're approaching the taxiway, if you see the sign that says Gulf, and Gulf here, you make a right or a left or whatever it is, it's always going to be before the taxiway. You won't have to worry about it being ever after, or like different states, or it's all under the same rules. Before you get to that intersection, you'll have the sign prior to the taxiway. What else do we have? Or whatever direction, whatever way we're trying to go to. Then we have red. And just as you thought, red is important. And we're going to put mandatory. So if you see a red sign, it's an important sign. Examples of red signs that you'll see are runways when you're not on them. Also, do not enters, they're red. So pay attention whenever you see a red sign. Okay, so those are the signs. We're gonna go with these and then build a little diagram after we discuss the markings. Okay, so black is where you are, yellow is directional, and then red's going to be important. So erasing that and going to markings. Again, I'm going to use the purple marker denoting yellow, the color yellow. So assuming that we park somewhere over here, this is going to be our ramp area, which is a non-movement area. So consider it the parking lot. You come up and you're going to see a line like this that gets into the taxiway. Now, if you notice, there's one solid line and then one dashed line. It denotes the beginning and ending of the movement area and non-movement area. So over here being a non-movement area, a ramp area, it's not controlled. Basically, the ATC, or air traffic controller around here, doesn't control the ramp area. That being said, if you go to more busier airports, you'll find that the ramp areas are also controlled, like LaGuardia or Kennedy, but that's way down your career. But here it is not controlled. So when you come up here, before we cross this line, which is a smaller version of a hold short line, which we'll get to in a second, you must get clearance before you go. Let's assume we have our clearance and we'll go. When we go, there's going to be a line in the middle over there, and that line is going to be your taxiway center line. Whenever you taxi, you'll taxi with that line between your legs, basically slicing you in half. We're in such small aircraft that if it's slicing you in half, it will be slicing your instructor in half. So you're smack dab on the middle of it. There are no lanes here at this airport. Our taxiways, they're not wide enough to be going up one way or down one way. Normally, if it's going one way, the taxiway at that moment is going another way, and then people are probably, other aircraft are waiting for you to clear. So, assuming that our aircraft is somewhere right here right now, and we're making our way to our runway. When it's right here, you're going to have a sign that will be over here, right, denoting where you are. So this sign is actually, so that I'm honest to you, this sign is going to be a black sign. And it's telling you where you are. So if you look up, it's going to tell you exactly where you are. And since it's right before a turn, and let's assume that it's ending, since it goes this way or it goes this way, it's going to need to have a yellow sign with arrows telling you, being a directional sign. So you stay on that taxiway center line, and let's assume that you keep taxiing, and so you got on this taxiway, and then you turned, and we're just going to make a quick trip to a runway. And then dun 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 dun, and then boom, 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 boom. All right, so here you're taxiing, you're trying to make your way to the runway, and this is going to be the closest runway, and let's assume that the wind is coming down that way, and they're going to take off this way. Okay, so they're taking off this way. So here we taxi this way, we go, let me just make sure that we got this right. Coming up, taxiing, come here, we're going with taxiway center line, and then we're turning. Now, when we turn here, if you notice there's two dashed lines on the side of your center line, this is called an enhanced center line. So it's an enhanced center line for the taxiway. This is telling you that you're approaching a runway. So you want to be heads up, you want to be paying attention to this, because we don't want to cross that line without permission. And what is that line called? It's arguably going to be the most important line of your life. This line right here, the double solid, double dash, denoting the entrance to the runway, is called a hold short line. Okay, now, when you're coming up, just so I don't forget to say it, let's say you're coming up to this runway, we like it here that you stop at least one plane's distance away from that hold short line. That way I know that you intend on stopping. If there's a problem, we can remedy it without crossing it. And that way you don't scare me, I don't scare you, we're both on the same page. Me being a pilot next to you, you being a pilot next to me, we're all on the same page that we're not crossing that without clearance. So we'll stand one plane's distance away from the hold short line. Now, before we move any further, let's attach the signs to what we're going to see there, and let's talk about if we cross that line without any permission. So when you come up to this runway, this is going to, let's assume this is a second taxiway, and we're just going to, well, actually, let's assume when we were coming down here, you're yellow. When you're this yellow sign, let's say it was Alpha. You turned, when you came onto Alpha turned black because you're on it. Now, You came up to this runway, and let's say this taxiway right here was designated Alpha 1. So over here in black, since you're on it, it's going to be Alpha 1. Since this is a runway and you're not on the runway, the sign of the runway is going to be in red. And if it's the beginning of a runway, it's only going to give you the direction of the runway going that way. So if we're going to stay true to north being upwards, this is going to be a west runway, so this is going to say 27. Runway 27. So here you are holding short of the runway. Notice how I took the hold short and I made it a verb, and I said I'm holding short of the runway. What happens if I cross this inadvertently without any permission, or intentionally without any permission? Well, at that point, that's a big no-no, and if it was intentional, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. If it was unintentional, you're probably still going to get in trouble, and it's called a runway incursion. So, runway incursion. Let's assume that there was nobody to be seen. Okay, no other plane in the airport, and I crossed it, and and tower's like, hey, what are you doing? You know, you weren't given clearance. Oh, but there's nobody around. It's still a runway incursion. So it's a runway incursion if you almost have a near miss, or if you have something. If you actually, God forbid, you have an accident or any of that sort, you're going to be dinged for a runway incursion. So another reason why we will only come up to the runway from one plane's distance away. There's no need to get up very close to the runway. Let me give you a scenario before we continue about this one plane distance away. Is if you come up to this runway, and let's assume somebody, maybe like me, lands on the runway that's runway 27, and I have a flat tire. Well, if I have a flat tire, then you got to wait till I get towed off, and you can't use that runway anymore. So in order for you to taxi back, you actually have to taxi back and go back. But if when you request your permission to taxi back, and your wing comes over that hold short line, well, you needed permission to do that. And if you didn't get permission, that's also called a runway incursion. So that's why if we stay just about a plane's distance away from the line, it's better for everybody. Going back to these markings and signs. So now here we have, let's just recap, denoting the movement, non-movement area, taxiway center line, enhanced center line, and then the hold short line. Now we got to the runway. So we got to the runway, and I'm actually going to switch to black right now, since the runway markings are in white. So we are on the runway now, and you see big white lines like that. That is called the threshold. These big white lines, you have as many depending on the width of the runway. This is called the threshold. The threshold denotes the beginning of the landing portion of the runway. Okay, it means this is where you could start your landing portion. It being that you could land there, you could take off from there. We'll get to why we call it a beginning of landing in a second. So this is your threshold. Now, right after your threshold, you're going to see the runway numbers, which is the runway designation. And as we discussed, this is based off of the heading of the runway. We're going to just say this is runway 27 right now. Then you'll have the runway center line. And each runway center line is 120 feet long, if I'm not mistaken, with an 80-foot gap. Just note it's runway center line for now. Those numbers will come to you later. Oh, by the way, these signs are not on the runway. So these signs are not on the runway. Your runway will be something like this. And let me just make this center line a little bit more centered. Now, a little bit later on down the runway, you're going to see ticks like this, and then you'll see two big white boxes. Let's talk about the big white boxes. The big white boxes are the 1,000-foot markers. So that's telling you that's 1,000 feet from the threshold. These ticks And then you'll find another set of them since we have long runways here. You'll find another set of 3, 2, and 1. They each denote 500 feet. All right. Now, let's assume, just for, to depict what I was talking about the landing portion, let's assume that you have another part of the runway that's over here, and that you had, let's say, a taxiway that comes from the other side of the airport that's over here, and then we have the hold short line. Okay, let's assume we had something like this, and it looks something like this, and then boom, boom, and then I think it looks like that. All right, now you see how these arrows, it has arrows pointing to the threshold? This is what we refer to as a displaced threshold. That means that the threshold is displaced forward. From this area here, you could take off. Let me finish this. You could take off from that area, and you could taxi from that area, but you cannot land there. So if you're approaching from this side and you come into land, you cannot land on the displaced threshold. You'd have to land on the threshold and beyond. Coming to this side of the runway, let's just assume that our runway ends over here, and there was a spot over here that looks like that. These are chevrons, and these are do not enter area. They'll come with a red sign that is like that. Okay, going back to this hold short line, since it is so important, and now we got to make sure that we receive our clearance before we get into the runway. And note that the solid line, when we're not on the runway, is on our side. That means we have to hold short on the solid line part. If you landed on this runway and then you cleared the runway, so let's say you're clearing this way. Let's say you landed on the runway and you took it to the end, runway 09, which would be the other side, and you clear it to the end. Well, you're allowed to come off the runway, and you need to clear the runway by clearing the entire plane from that hold short line, and then you stop and you wait to get your clearance to continue your taxi, because we need here, since the movement area, we need clearance to move around over here. So when you land, you could clear the runway and stop there. We clear on the first available taxiway. When you go to take off, you hold short prior to it. So you don't cross that solid line and stand here. You hold short prior to it. Again, by one plane's distance away, please. That is not a rule, but as we're learning, it is good practice for us now. And yeah, that is that. Now, talking about lights, at night, when we are flying around, we want to know what our lighting looks like. Our taxiway lighting at night is blue. So you'll probably see these before you see the runway lights, if the runway lights are dim. Our runway edge lights are actually white, so you'll see them on the runway. At the last half of the runway, they change, or 3,000 feet, whichever one is less or greater, I can't remember. They change to amber, and then the last 1,000 feet is red. Those are the edge lights. The runway center line lights are white, and again, the last 3,000 or half, they alternate between white and amber, and then the last bit of it, the last 1,000 feet, they're going to be red. We do have a rotating beacon that denotes a civilian airport, and it's a beacon. You'll look for it on your airport diagram, see where you find it, and it will rotate green and white. So it rotates green and white. We'll show that to you or ask your instructor to show you where it is. And that is it for now. Thank you.